The envelope on the table wasn't mine, but its contents tore my world apart. My wife's carefully hidden plans, divorce, betrayal, and a new life with another man were all spelled out, and I was never meant to find them. But she had underestimated me, and by the time it was over, she'd regret ever trying to destroy what we built. I came home that afternoon expecting just another quiet evening. It had been a long day, and all I wanted was to collapse into my favorite chair, watch the news, and maybe have a beer. But as soon as I walked through the door, I noticed something on the table that didn't belong there. A plain white envelope with a law firm's logo embossed in the corner. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I mean, what would a lawyer's letter be doing at our house? My wife, Laura, wasn't home yet, and our routine was simple enough. Bills went straight to her little corner desk, and anything else came through email these days. But there it was, glaring at me under the soft glow of the dining room light. I almost didn't open it. I swear, I was just going to leave it there and ask Laura about it when she got back. But the way it sat there, mocking me with its unexpected presence, made me reach for it. The name on the address wasn't mine. It was hers. Laura Dawson. I hesitated, my hand hovering above the seal. Opening someone else's mail wasn't exactly something I was proud of, but curiosity, or maybe instinct, got the better of me. I thought maybe it was something trivial, a parking ticket, an HOA notice. But as I peeled back the flap and pulled out the letter inside, the world as I knew it started to fall apart. It was from a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. This one specialized in divorce. And it wasn't addressed to me at all. No, this letter laid out plans that Laura had apparently been working on for months. Filing for divorce, selling our house, splitting the assets, and my hands shook as I read further. She wasn't just leaving me. She was planning to move in with someone else. The name jumped off the page like a punch to the gut. Mark Stanton, a man I'd never even heard of. And just like that, the carefully constructed reality I'd lived in for the past 10 years shattered into a million pieces. I sat there, clutching the letter like it might disintegrate in my hands, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might leap out of my chest. Mark Stanton. The name echoed in my mind, a stranger's name entwined with my wife's in a way I never could have imagined. I read the letter again, slower this time, as if I had misunderstood something. But the words didn't change. They were deliberate, calculating, just like the woman I thought I knew. Laura wasn't just preparing to leave me. She was plotting an entirely new life without me in it. The details cut like a knife. She'd been meeting with this lawyer for months, negotiating terms to sell our house, the home we built together. She planned to take half of everything, our savings, the investments we'd painstakingly grown over the years. But the final blow was the mention of relocating to Mark's residence. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? And how could Laura, my wife of 10 years, the woman I had shared my life and my dreams with, be capable of such a cold, premeditated betrayal? I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the letter, the paper crumpling slightly under the pressure of my grip. The clock ticked on, each second dragging out like a lifetime. Eventually, I realized I was still sitting in my coat, my bag slumped against the chair leg. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the house felt cold, colder than it ever had. I wasn't sure what to do. Should I confront her? Pretend I hadn't seen it? I knew I couldn't just sit on this, but charging into a conversation without knowing the full picture felt like walking into a minefield. Then it hit me. If Laura had been hiding this, there were probably more secrets lurking in the shadows. And if I wanted the truth, I needed to find it myself. I went upstairs to the bedroom we'd shared for years, a place that now felt foreign. I opened her closet, not knowing exactly what I was looking for, but hoping something would jump out at me. At first, there was nothing unusual, just her clothes, neatly arranged, her favorite perfume sitting on the dresser. But then I noticed her laptop bag tucked under the bed. Laura rarely took her work home, so I knew something about that bag didn't add up. Sliding it out carefully, I unzipped it and found her laptop, along with a folder stuffed with papers. My hands shook as I opened the folder. There were receipts from restaurants I'd never heard of, hotel bookings that didn't match any trips I remembered, and emails, printed emails, between her and Mark. "Can't wait until we're finally together," one read. Another, "Once the house is sold, everything will fall into place." I felt sick. This wasn't just some fling. This was a carefully orchestrated plan to dismantle our life, brick by brick, and rebuild it with someone else. At that moment, I made a decision. If Laura thought she could pull this off without me noticing, she was dead wrong. If she wanted to play games, she'd see just how much of a fight I had left in me. I barely slept that night. My mind raced, every memory of Laura suddenly cast in a new, suspicious light. Had there been signs I missed? Times she came home late, or seemed distracted? It was like my whole marriage had been rewritten in my mind, every happy moment tainted by doubt. By the time morning came, I was running on fumes but fueled by determination. If Laura thought she could outsmart me, she didn't know who she was dealing with. I wasn't about to roll over and let her walk away with half of everything I'd worked so hard to build, especially not to cozy up with some guy I didn't even know. The first step was to gather evidence. I wasn't just angry, I was methodical. I scanned every receipt, every email, and every document I found in that folder, creating a digital record of her betrayal. Then, I made a few calls. I had a close friend, Eric, who happened to be a divorce attorney. We weren't best buddies or anything, but we'd known each other since college, and I trusted him to give me sound advice. Eric didn't mince words. "This is bad," he said after I explained the situation and sent him copies of the documents. "She's clearly planning to take you to the cleaners. But if we play this smart, you have options." I leaned forward in my chair, gripping the phone like a lifeline. "What kind of options?" "Well," he began, "Washington is a no-fault divorce state, which means infidelity doesn't necessarily impact the division of assets. But her premeditation and the fact that she's hiding assets, like these plans with Mark, could work in your favor. The key is to move quickly before she does." That was all I needed to hear. I hung up with Eric and spent the rest of the day getting my ducks in a row. I opened a new bank account, transferred my direct deposits, and started documenting everything, every purchase, every withdrawal, every suspicious action Laura had taken in the past few months. I even changed the passwords on my personal accounts, making sure she couldn't access anything without my consent. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. When Laura came home that evening, she acted like it was just another day. She kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, and even made her famous chicken pot pie for dinner. It was all so disgustingly ordinary that I wanted to scream, but I played along. I smiled, I nodded, and I acted like nothing was wrong. Inside, though, I was boiling. Every word out of her mouth felt like another lie, another thread in the web of deceit she'd spun around me. It wasn't until she went to bed that I made my next move. With her laptop safely back in her bag and my copies of the evidence stored in a secure cloud drive, I pulled out my own laptop and started digging deeper into our financials. What I found made my blood run cold. Laura had already listed our house with a realtor. She hadn't told me, of course, but the paperwork was there. Contracts signed, photos taken, and the listing scheduled to go live in less than a week. She'd even coordinated with Mark to handle the move, his address already marked as her future residence. That was the moment I knew I couldn't wait. Laura had crossed every line imaginable, and if I didn't act fast, she'd get away with everything. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. Laura may have thought she held all the cards, but she underestimated me. This wasn't just about salvaging what was mine. It was about sending a message. You don't build a life with someone for 10 years only to betray them and expect to walk away unscathed. After Laura left for work, I made a call to Eric. "It's time," I said, my voice firm. "Understood," he replied. "I'll start drafting the paperwork, but you need to act fast on your end. Do you have access to the realtor she's working with?" "I'll take care of it," I said. And I did. I called the agency handling our house and pretended to be an interested buyer. It didn't take much to get details from the agent, a cheery woman named Diane, who mentioned the house was scheduled to be listed that weekend. I thanked her, hung up, and immediately called Eric back. With his guidance, I filed an injunction to freeze the sale of the property. Laura might have had plans, but legally, she couldn't move forward without my consent. Next, I made another call to a private investigator. If Laura was sneaking around with this Mark Stanton, I needed more than text messages and emails. I needed hard proof, photos, timestamps, anything that could tip the scales in my favor. The PI, a sharp and resourceful woman named Kate, assured me she'd get what I needed. In the meantime, I started securing other assets. Our joint accounts were the first to go. I left enough in them to avoid suspicion, but I quietly moved the bulk of the funds into a personal account in my name. Then came the smaller things: insurance policies, retirement plans, even the subscriptions we shared. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. The hardest part was facing Laura every evening, pretending like everything was fine. She had no idea that the ground beneath her carefully crafted plan was crumbling. I'd catch her sneaking glances at her phone during dinner, probably texting Mark, and I had to fight the urge to call her out. Not yet. Timing was everything. A few days later, Kate called with an update. "We've got him," she said. "What do you mean?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "Mark Stanton," she replied. "We've got photos of him meeting Laura at a restaurant downtown. They were intimate, to put it lightly. And that's not all. We did some digging on him, and it turns out he's not exactly the kind of guy you'd want to rebuild your life with." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "He's got a history," Kate explained. "Bankruptcy, multiple failed business ventures, even a restraining order filed by an ex-girlfriend. He's been married twice and left both marriages in shambles. He's using your wife, plain and simple." I hung up, feeling a mix of anger and vindication. So, this was the man Laura was willing to destroy our life for. A fraud, a con artist. It made her betrayal sting even more, but it also gave me a sense of resolve. If she thought she was moving on to something better, she was in for a rude awakening. That evening, I put the next part of my plan into motion. While Laura was in the shower, I called a locksmith and arranged to have the locks changed on Friday afternoon. It was bold, but by then, I'd have everything in place. I also reached out to Diane, the realtor, this time as myself. I explained the situation and presented her with the court order blocking the sale. She was shocked but cooperative, agreeing to hold off on any further action. By the time Friday rolled around, I had everything I needed. The divorce papers were filed, the house was secured, and the evidence of Laura's affair was ironclad. All that was left was to confront her. Friday evening arrived, and I felt an odd mix of dread and determination. This was it, the moment I would confront Laura and turn the tables on her betrayal. My plan was carefully laid out, every detail accounted for. Now, it was time to see if it would all come together. Laura came home around 6:30, her usual smile plastered on her face. She kissed me on the cheek and asked about my day, as if nothing was amiss. The sight of her acting so normal, so confident in her deception, fueled the fire in my chest. "Busy day," I said, keeping my tone light. "How about you?" She shrugged. "The usual. Meetings, errands. You know how it is." I nodded, fighting back the urge to call her out then and there. Instead, I played along, letting her think she was still in control. We sat down for dinner, spaghetti, her favorite, and made small talk about the weekend plans. She didn't know it yet, but her weekend plans were about to take a drastic turn. After dinner, I cleared the table while she went upstairs to shower. It was a routine we'd fallen into over the years, one that felt strangely hollow now. As soon as I heard the water running, I took my cue. I grabbed the manila folder with all the evidence, the photos, the texts, the receipts, and placed it on the coffee table in the living room. Then I sat down and waited. When Laura came back downstairs, she was in her usual post-shower attire, yoga pants and a loose sweatshirt. She paused when she saw me sitting there, the folder in plain sight. "What's that?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "Sit down," I said, my tone steady but firm. Her eyes darted to the folder, then back to me. "Michael, what's going on?" "Sit," I repeated, gesturing to the couch. Reluctantly, she did, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I picked up the folder and placed it in front of her. "Open it," I said. She hesitated, her eyes narrowing. "What is this?" "You'll see." With trembling hands, she opened the folder and began flipping through its contents. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock to outright panic as she read through the emails, saw the receipts, and finally landed on the photos of her and Mark. "I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't," I said, cutting her off. "Don't insult me by pretending there's an explanation for this." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. "Not now. Michael, I never meant for you to find out like this." I scoffed. "You mean you never meant for me to find out at all?" She shook her head, her voice trembling. "It's not what you think. Mark and I are planning to sell our house, take half my assets, and move in together," I said, finishing her sentence. Did I miss anything? She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I let her cry for a moment before speaking again. "Laura, I loved you. I built my life around you. And this is how you repay me? By sneaking around, lying to my face, and plotting to leave me for some con artist?" She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "I was unhappy," she whispered. "I didn't know how to tell you." "Unhappy?" I repeated, incredulous. "So your solution was to destroy everything we built together? To betray me?" She didn't answer, her silence confirming what I already knew. I stood, unable to look at her any longer. "You need to leave." Her head snapped up. "What?" "You heard me," I said, my voice cold. "I've already had the locks changed. Your things are packed and in the garage. You can stay with Mark or wherever else you want, but you're not staying here." She stared at me, stunned. "Michael, please. We can work this out." I laughed bitterly. "Work this out? Laura, you didn't just cross a line. You obliterated it. There's no coming back from this." She started to protest, but I held up a hand to stop her. "The divorce papers are already filed. You'll get your share of the assets, but that's it. I'm done." For a moment, she just sat there, her mouth opening and closing as she tried to find the right words. But there were no words that could fix what she'd done. Finally, she stood, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't respond. I watched as she walked to the garage, her footsteps echoing in the silence of the house. When I heard the door close behind her, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It was over. The life I thought I had, the woman I thought I knew, it was all gone. But as I sat there, alone in the quiet of my now empty house, I realized something else. I wasn't just a victim of her betrayal. I was a survivor, and I was ready to start over. The door closing behind Laura was a sound I'd never forget. It wasn't just the sound of her leaving. It was the sound of the life we'd built together coming to an end. I sat in the silence for what felt like hours, letting the weight of it all sink in. But as heavy as it was, there was also a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, and the worst was behind me. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustments. I had to learn how to live alone again, how to fill the space she had once occupied. At first, it was painful, passing by her favorite chair, hearing her laugh echo in my mind. But over time, the house started to feel like mine again, not ours. Eric handled the legal side of things with precision. Laura signed the divorce papers without much resistance, probably because she knew she didn't have a leg to stand on. The evidence I'd collected made it clear that she had betrayed me, and while infidelity didn't hold much legal weight in our state, it did help us negotiate terms. She got her share of the assets, as agreed, but not a penny more. The house stayed in my name. As for Mark Stanton, I didn't hear much about him after the confrontation. Kate, my private investigator, informed me that he had a track record of latching onto vulnerable women, and Laura had been no exception. Whether they stayed together or fell apart wasn't my concern anymore. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. The kids were the hardest part. Laura and I didn't have children together, but we had talked about starting a family for years. Now, that dream was gone, replaced by a void I wasn't sure how to fill. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects and challenges to keep my mind occupied. I also reconnected with old friends, people I'd lost touch with over the years as my world had revolved around Laura. One evening, about 6 months after she left, I got a call from her. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Michael," she said, her voice hesitant, "can we talk?" "What is there to talk about, Laura?" I replied, keeping my tone measured. I wanted to apologize. For everything. For hurting you. For being so selfish. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to yell, to unleash the anger I'd buried for months. But another part of me, the part that had moved on, just felt tired. "I appreciate the apology," I said after a long pause. "But it doesn't change anything." "I know," she whispered. "I just needed you to hear it." There was a silence between us, heavy but not uncomfortable. Finally, she said, "I hope you're happy, Michael. You deserve to be." "Thank you," I replied, meaning it. After we hung up, I felt a strange sense of closure. Laura's apology didn't erase the pain, but it gave me permission to let go of the anger I'd been carrying. For the first time in months, I felt free. Life didn't go back to normal after that. It went somewhere better. I started volunteering at a local shelter, something I'd always wanted to do but never found the time for. I traveled, exploring places I'd only dreamed of visiting. And slowly, I opened myself up to the idea of love again. Looking back, Laura's betrayal was the most painful experience of my life. But it also taught me something valuable: resilience. I learned that even when everything falls apart, you can rebuild. Not the same life, but a new one. Stronger, wiser, and more authentic. And that's exactly what I did.